in cars getting coffee. Today my guest is Mr. Todd Phillips. Todd, good morning.
Good morning.
Can I buy you coffee?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Look, I'm excited about the fact that we're doing a video together and getting to know each other in a car. Coffee really was the reason I came.
Okay.
Okay, just want you to know that I'm an addict.
How many cups do you drink a day?
You know, a lot. No, that's not true. I will go in and get my 20-ounce venti coffee at Starbucks in the morning, and then other than today,
yeah,
I've probably gone a year with just that one cup.
Really?
Yeah, just one, but it's a big cup.
It's venti.
20 ounces.
So you will be the second person to take me up on the venti size. The first person was Jimmy Dale.
Well, what'd he do?
Well, he got venti.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
But it may have been a double venti.
Wow, Jimmy.
Can you imagine Jimmy with a double venti?
Jimmy, no, I can't. In fact, how long? That video must have lasted 3.5. You guys could have driven to Austin and back.
We could have, and we had. I edited quite a bit out, but it was great stuff. But yeah, it was.
Jimmy.
He was.
I love Jimmy. Whatever I'm looking at here, Jimmy, you're great.
So Todd, one of the reasons I wanted you to be in the car, and I wanted to catch up with you is maybe I've been in a cave, I don't know, but I really first kind of caught into the last well stuff, I guess while you were on the barge in Lake Ray Hubbard.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, I started realizing that there was a lot of the same people that we knew, and so that got me captivated. And so I was, tuning into your Facebook Live.
Our nightly show.
Yeah, it was great. So tell me a little bit about how the whole, okay, first of all, go back a little bit. Jimmy gave us some of the background info already on your story from DC, but for the sake of this, tell us how you went from Austin to DC, and then how did Liberia get on your heart? Wow,
that's a big one. So I grew up in Austin, and actually moved to San Antonio from Austin for about 7 years. And then went up to DC from San Antonio. So I took a the scenic route to get here to Dallas. All the while, from 24, I started my relationship with Christ at 24. I'm 49 now. So we were just talking about this, my wife and I, that I've been a Christian longer than I had not been a Christian, which is kind of cool. But I didn't grow up in the church at all. Grew up in Austin, spent 7 years, I'm trying to think when it was. It was from 98 to about 04 in San Antonio. And in Austin and San Antonio, we had two ministries. One was called Austin Metro, the other one was called San Antonio Metro, and it was an evangelistic event on a weekly basis, every Monday and Tuesday night, 52 weeks a year, to reach out to young people that were kind of disenfranchised from the church or never darkened the door of a church. So I did that for about 8-9 years total. And then I moved up to Washington, D.C. to work at McLean Bible Church. McLean Bible Church it's really the largest church out in the East Coast. Really amazing church. Lon Solomon was a senior pastor at the time. And there was a church within a church called Frontline. And that was the ministry that they asked me to come up and be a part of. And at the time when I went up there, this was in 2004, when I went up there, I was just going to work under Ken Baugh, who was the senior pastor of Frontline. So you had Lon Solomon at McLean Bible Church. There were about 10,000 people there. There are about 1,500 people going to this young adult church called Frontline. And 2 months, no, less than that, 6 weeks after I got there, I was going to be working with Ken, who was a very close friend of mine. He was a senior pastor. I was going to work on his staff. So I took over the senior pastor role at Frontline, the young adult church inside McLean Bible Church. And that church, that young adult church, is actually what started, a group of people in that church started the Last Well, which is this ministry I'm doing in Liberia. Back in 2008, I had been there for about almost 5 years as a senior pastor at Frontline. Average age, by the way, of the whole church was 27. In the 3 years when I took over, we went from 1 campus to 10 campuses in 36 months. We had what we called a spiritual beltway around DC. I or one of my teaching team would teach, and then we'd live cast that to 9 other campuses. So that's kind of how it was set up. So you had 4,000 young adults at the time, average age of 27, all type A, high output, passionate, intelligent, moving from all over the world to DC to change the world. Okay, just an incredible bunch of people. These young adults saw this movie, Amazing Grace. Maybe you've seen it. It's about William Wilberforce ending slavery in the UK. credited with ending slavery. He wanted to be a priest. God took him into Parliament, spent 40 years of his life fighting the slave trade. Gavel goes down, slave trade's illegal. 72 hours later, Wilberforce is dead. Okay, so here's a man who gave his whole life to this cause that Christ had given him. So these 4,000 young adults, I'm convinced they all saw this movie in about a 2-week time frame. They were all coming to me at Starbucks and after the church services at the church offices, and they were like, hey, Pastor Todd, why can't we see something end in our generation?
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like, this is amazing. So this is, I'm like, God, what do you want to do with this groundswell of, you know, passion? So we spent 2 months with 2 questions. We got our staff and key leaders of the church together, all these young adults, and we said, what's the worst place in the world? That was question number 1, that no one wants to go to. And what's the greatest physical need in that region of the world that we can use to share the gospel? That was it. Worst place, greatest need. Worst place, greatest need. In 2 months, we found out that Liberia, this little West African country, was the worst place we could find. The second poorest country in the world, according to the International Monetary Fund. Second most miserable place to live in the world, according to the CIA fact book. They actually keep a misery index. There's an index for that.
Wow.
Second most miserable. The most corrupt country in the world, according to USA Today. And they just came out of a 14-year civil war, 500,000 people dead. So this place was just left for dead. All the nonprofits, all the Christian agencies, all the government groups were just leaving in droves. They just left it for dead. And these young adults, average age of 27, were like, that's where we'd like to go. They wanted to go to the worst place in the world, and they found it. So that's how we found Liberia. And really quickly we realized that water was the greatest need. Up to 100 people a day, Chris, were dying from waterborne disease. Just totally preventable. Half of them are children under the age of 15. These young adults said that's unconscionable. We can't have that happen. So Liberia was the place. Water was going to be the tool. The gospel border to border in a country for the first time in history was the goal. And we created a mission, gospel and clean water to all of Liberia, every man, woman, and child, border to border by 2020. So that's how we got to Liberia. Well, we haven't done it yet. We are 24 months away from our drop dead date of the last well being drilled and the gospel preached in that last village. And then we use this barge initiative, which I guess we're going to talk about. We used that to actually raise, the goal was 2.3 million, which was half the money we had left to get to the finish line.
Okay.
So we needed to reach about 1 million more people than we'd already reached. That was going to be about $4.6 million more than we had. So we decided that I was going to live on a barge until we raised half that money.
So when you say we, who's the proverbial we?
Yeah, you know, it's funny you asked that.
Because you were the only one that lived on the barge.
Jimmy is one of those. We sat down as a board of directors. There's 8 of us. I'm on the board. There's 7 other guys, and we were trying to think of an initiative that that would really explode the awareness of the organization. Finish this thing. And so we sat down as a board, and about 2 hours into this conversation, we thought about all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean,
like, what were some of those things? What was on the short list?
Well, I watch, I don't know if anybody watches David Blaine, but he's this magician that does all these crazy things.
Levitates.
Like he levitates, froze himself in a block of ice for 3 days, stood on top of a 200-foot pole for like a week. I mean, just weird stuff. And I thought, you know, that's the kind of stuff that Harry Houdini used to do, David Blaine does now, but nobody in the nonprofit world is using these kinds of, and they raised tremendous amount of awareness. I said, let's just do something crazy and old school. So one of the ideas was to get a massive crane at I-30 and 75 right there on the east side of downtown, where, you know, 480,000 cars a day go by, and just a crane straight up out of the ground where that intersection is, and hang a glass box, and I would live in this glass box until we raised the money. Crazy stuff like that. But then we thought, well, where are we going to put how's he going to go to the bathroom? How are we going to get food to him? I mean, it started to get really, but that was the stupid, crazy stuff we thought. And we finally somebody, and I don't know who it was, could have been me, I just really don't remember who it was. Somebody said, you know, half the drinking water for East Dallas comes out of Lake Ray Hubbard. And I said, you know what, we ought to do something on Lake Ray Hubbard. And basically, you know, whatever we do on it, we have water, here it is. They don't in Liberia, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
We built this, we talked to Chandler's Landing in Rockwall and Heath, and they built a 20 by 20 foot barge, basically. It was just a raft, and then we kind of built a structure on top of it. It had a tent, an outhouse, or a porta potty, and a small generator. That was really everything. And so I lived on that thing for 27 days.
Could you have picked a rainier 2 months in the history?
So messed up.
I mean, there's like 20 plus inches in those 2 months. Or
now
something.
Officially the worst month on record.
It must be, yeah.
The worst month on record. So I got there October 10th, got off on November 6th, 27 days total. And it was the worst weather on record. We had 5-foot swells out in Lake Ray Hubbard. At different times, we had 8 3/4-inch steel cables attached to 1,200-pound cement anchors. And 6 of those 8 cables broke. 3/4-inch steel. The guys at Chandler's Landing would pull them up. They'd pull the cables up on their boat, and it would just fray like just fray. And they would look at me and yell at me from 30 feet away going, "Never seen that before." I'm like, does that encourage me? Just, I mean, what are you trying to tell me? So anyway, yeah, we could do it again.
Well, I think it was, first of all, I think it was a genius idea, just to your point, for the awareness piece, but kind of going back to that, the goal of those professionals there in DC. And I think that's what really kind of drew me into the story. I'm familiar with a lot of different ministry outlets, initiatives. We, in fact, Dallas Christian, we do some wells in Ghana.
Oh, great.
We go to Atiku and put wells up. But just to kind of what you were describing, though, a comprehensive, we want to do it all, and we want to set a date, and we want to see it to completion, and we believe that God is big enough and God enough to bring the infrastructure in place. Because, you know, I grew up in the Salvation Army, and so for the Salvation Armies, their premise or their conviction is we can bring the gospel to somebody, but if they're hungry, if they're cold, if they don't have shelter, the physical limitations and needs are going to supersede the spiritual felt need. And so they may not even know that there's this need for a savior when they don't have their physical needs met. And so as you package that together, the idea of meeting their physical needs, but also sustainable, right? So that was you put in place an infrastructure and working with the government, and as Jimmy was saying, kind of leaving the coordinates to all the wells and all the, so as I was kind of trolling you guys, no pun intended, but you know, kind of on the Facebook, and I started seeing the energy, and obviously your magnetism and personality was just kind of brought you in as the audience. And so I was able to kind of, in some ways, and I honked at you a few times. So when I crossed the bridge, I honked at you.
Hey, those encouraged me. I'm serious about that.
I was honking, and I was just thinking, man, this is amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing to watch, and we didn't know. People asked me, how long were you willing to stay out there? Well, until we got done. But mentally and prayerfully, I had kind of a deal with God.
What am I getting you?
You know what? I want. What do I want? I would like a grande.
Sure.
Yeah, grande and a venti cup. I've got all sorts of details.
Okay. What can I get you?
A grande dark and a venti cup.
Okay.
And then fill the rest with non-fat milk and 4 Splenda.
You do have the concoction.
Oh yeah, I'm down.
I mean,
usually it's steamed non-fat milk, but it just depends on the day. Yeah. That's
psychologically on the barge, when did you hit a breaking? Did you hit a breaking point? So did you reach a point where you felt like, okay, God, you're going to have to really sustain this for me?
Oh well, yeah. That's what I was telling you a second ago. So God and I had kind of worked out a 21-day schedule. All right. I do mountaineering. I haven't gone in a couple years, but my goal is still the 7 summits. It's the highest peak on each continent. So I got into that 20 years ago. So I've climbed Kilimanjaro in Africa, Mount Elbrus in Russia, and the highest peak in Europe. Tried Aconcagua in South America. Got helicoptered off that thing. So I've tried a lot.
Man, Ray Hubbard was nothing.
No. Ray Hubbard. Here's the deal. So I tell you that to tell you this. After the first week of storms, when we lost 3 of the 4 anchors, the big tarp on the top that was kind of the billboard for people on I-30 to see us ripped off because of the high winds. I mean, the place just got destroyed, and I just got beat to a pulp along with it. I had some of my mountaineering buddies call me from DC, text me actually, and said, hey, what's worse, a whiteout at 19,000 feet on Mount Elbrus, because they remembered this really, really bad storm we were in, or the barge? And all I did was text back barge.
Really?
I just hit barge, send.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It's like being in the worst situation I've ever been on. I've been on some really, really messed up situations on mountains. Really bad. Horribly bad. It's like that, and then the mountain is in a constant 8-foot shifting earthquake.